Hello, you. Notice I didn't say hey there. It just kind of occurred to me that my channel name is helloleesh, and yet I say hey there at the beginning of every video. So maybe I'll change things. I don't know. See how that feels for you. Hello, you. Let me know what you think. Leave me a comment. Today, I want to talk about Emma Chamberlain. And I want to give a shout out to iNabber. The reason I want to talk about Emma Chamberlain is because of a video I watched of his titled How Emma Chamberlain Became Hated for Being Relatable, which really kind of discussed some of the criticism, bullying that Emma has been on the receiving end of for being Emma.
And this resulted in a lot of fair criticism. I get the feeling that she was trying to put off whatever version she shows herself in her videos, but it came off as really forced and ingenuine. I don't understand the hype about this girl. When you can't be funny without editing. Look at me. I'm too quirky and relatable to thank my audience properly. An awkward interview, which a lot of people saw as disgenuine. It apparently exposed the true character of Emma Chamberlain and was showing that she's not really this relatable girl and is actually this manipulative mastermind which has tricked the internet into subscribing to her channel millions of times and giving her millions of views and millions of dollars. Or maybe a teenager that's regularly spoken about depression and anxiety wasn't exactly too good in front of a crowd of a lot of people. Maybe some people aren't good in front of crowds. I definitely believe that in the last few years, it has certainly changed her content and perhaps even changed her slightly as a person, because naturally so, when you have a lot of people out there saying that you are faking your own personality on the internet to be relatable as some manipulative mastermind, that's probably going to affect you. But it seems to be that in the last few years, a lot of people have taken Emma Chamberlain's struggle with mental health issues and said, ooh, that it's not real because she's trying to get views and she's just trying to be relatable to the average teenager out there who's depressed. You know, other content creators can be depressed too. You know, that's a, you know, I get depressed, right? You know that. You know, I don't fake that to be relatable. If anything, I think a lot of content creators wished they were faking their depression. I think a lot of people wish that they were faking it to get millions of dollars, because that would actually be much more easier to live with than actually having to deal with depression every day.
First, I want to take a moment to tell you about today's sponsor, Scentbird. And I'm so excited Scentbird decided that they wanted to partner with me, because it's one of those subscription services that I've seen all over YouTube, obviously, but I wasn't so sure I wanted to try. So if that's you, pay attention. I kind of have this obsession with like smelling nice all the time. But then at the same time, I've collected these perfumes, these designer perfumes that I bought years ago, and no lie, like, listen, I know you're going to tell me that I shouldn't be doing this, and I know I need to throw them out. They're no good. But I have some right behind me that are like almost a decade old. So when my Scentbird came in the mail, I was so excited to try these new perfumes. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription service that lets you shop from over 600 brands. Designer brands like Prada, Gucci, Versace, as well as indie labels like Vince Camuto, The Harmonist, and Confessions of a Rebel. Scentbird works directly with the brands, so no shady business if you were wondering about that. And it's a flexible subscription, so it's one of those where you can skip any month, no penalties. That's a big one for me anytime I decide to sign up with any subscription service. With each fragrance, you'll get a 30-day supply, so you get to try it on for a good month before you decide whether or not you want to commit to a full-size bottle. And you can upgrade to 2 to 3 products a month if you choose to. Something else to think about, the scents that you've been wearing in the spring and summer might be too light for the heavy layers that you will likely be wearing in fall and winter. And conversely, those that you will be wearing in fall and winter may be too strong for spring and summer. I bet you hadn't thought of that. Had you thought of that? If you did, you're better than me, because I hadn't thought of that. Instead of buying full-size bottles that make sense for one season but not for another, and quite frankly, let's just be real, like you just might get sick of over time. You can discover new fragrances based on a personalized quiz. This month I wanted to get a mix of scents, like a little bit of flirty, a little bit of earthy, a little bit of cool, a little bit of sexy. So I've tried Rouge by Christian Siriano, Get a Room by Confessions of a Rebel, Minkoff by Rebecca Minkoff, and Blush by Rebecca Minkoff, which I'm wearing today because it's got a very distinctly feminine scent, which is the vibe today. With Scentbird, you get a good amount of high-end fragrances for just $16 a month. I actually came to find recently that I prefer rollerballs anyway because I carry a small purse, so fragrances of this size and this price just makes sense for someone like me. And then decide if you want to buy the full bottle. If not, it was $16, not $200. Scentbird is now available in Canada, which specifically one of my Canadian friends expressed was a concern, so you're welcome. Click the link in my description. Canadian friends, I'm looking at you. Make sure to use my coupon code helloleesh for 30% off your first month at Scentbird. It's just $11 for your first month. And smell nice at a price you can afford. Thank you, Scentbird, for sponsoring this video and for making me smell oh so nice. So, iNabber pointed out that Emma Chamberlain has not recently, I think this maybe has been going on since Emma's been on the platform. I mean, all public figures are subject to hate and criticism and all of that. But one of the common criticisms of Emma Chamberlain is that she is seen as being attempting to be quirky and relatable, and that it's all kind of just contrived. And more disparagingly, acting like I don't know that word, more disparagingly, and here recently it seems, Emma has pointed out that people have criticized her for using mental health, like really kind of like staging these mental health moments and these mental health struggles that she's sharing with her audience, that she's kind of faking all of that for the sake of being quirky and relatable, which is Emma's brand. iNabber, I don't want to keep calling him iNabber. I know his name. iNabber, his name. Fraser. Yeah. Totally didn't have to look that up. Now, what was I even saying? Fraser made a point that I very much agree with, that you aren't exempt from criticism because you're going through mental health struggles. And that's really important to note because so many of us are going through our own mental health journeys, crises, struggles, recoveries, all of that. And if we excused every single bad behavior for the sake of mental health, I'm pretty sure most killers would probably just be on the street and not in prison. But after I watched Fraser's video and decided to check out some of Emma Chamberlain's more recent videos, as well as some of her podcast episodes, I listened to one of her podcast episodes with the title Rock Bottom. And the combination of the podcast and the videos I watched and iNabber's video really just kind of got me thinking about a few conversations that come out of topics like this. And one of them being the concept that YouTubers or influencers, content creators, we often hear that they are emotionally stunted at the point that they became famous. But I also think that there is kind of a flip side to that coin, especially for these really young creators, that kind of forces them to grow up really fast. And of course, it's been a long time since I was 20 years old, so I don't remember exactly what I was saying at that time unless I pull up my old live journal, which I might. There might be some wisdom in there. But I did find Emma to be quite insightful and wise for a 20-year-old woman. And I do think that this experience of being a public figure for the past 4 or 5 years or so, I think that has a lot to do with it. The things that she says, her introspections, it still shows that you're listening to a 20-year-old young woman. But there were still things she said that were framed in a way that maybe helped me figure out some things for myself. So there was that. That was the big one for me. But also this whole concept of relatability. I think we oftentimes hear criticism of YouTubers becoming less and less relatable the more successful they get. Because naturally, these very successful YouTubers or TikTokers, creators, you know what I mean. The more money they make, the more they're moving into these huge mansions and hanging out with celebrities, which, Emma went to the Met Gala, so she definitely falls into that category. of course, your audience who are just kind of your lay people, young people, teenagers in their bedrooms in the Midwest, living in middle-class neighborhoods. Of course, that's not everyone. That's an example. But of course, it's harder and harder to relate to these creators as you're watching them lead these very glamorous lives. But I think there is a discussion around the idea that mental health struggles are universal. They don't discriminate. And there are times where the public kind of recognizes that. And there are other times where the public will say things like, and I've been there before. I've said things like this before, like, oh, you live in a, however millions of dollars mansion. Like, what do you have to cry about? So I do think it's important that Emma has these conversations with us. I do think there is a conversation there too about these changes, these introspections, all being part of really Emma Chamberlain's growth from a teenager that the public met when she was at around 16 on her platform to a young woman who is now 20 years old. So let's talk about what she said on this podcast in this episode called Rock Bottom. And listen, before I get into it, before I start reading off my notes, you probably know that I'm an alcoholic in recovery, sober, God willing, 9 years as of October 3rd. So rock bottom is a concept, obviously, that is discussed in recovery programs often. You oftentimes hear that a person needs to reach their rock bottom in addiction recovery terms, hitting their rock bottom before they decide to make a change for the better. But in my opinion, people can reach rock bottom, numerous rock bottoms in their lives. And I think this is kind of how Emma was framing it as well, as just kind of rock bottom as a concept that is a place that you can reach from time to time in your life, which should serve as a vessel for change. Spoiler, that's what it's all about.
I've been making YouTube videos since I was 16, and I'm 20 now, and that's about 4 years. And I started YouTube because I needed a hobby. I needed like a creative outlet. I needed something to put my energy towards because I was struggling with one of the most severe cases of depression that I've dealt with in my life. One of the worst episodes I've ever had. And I needed something to excite me, to get me out of bed in the morning.
One of the very common threads in terms of Emma Chamberlain's mental health that she discusses very openly is her battle with depression. She talks about starting her YouTube channel at 16 as sort of something to throw herself into and kind of, I don't know if distract is the proper, I don't know if I want to call it a cure, but it was an answer to her depression at the time. And it was something for her to be excited about as like a really fun hobby that just happened to make her famous. And she expresses and makes it very clear at the beginning of this podcast that her real passion when it came to creating these videos was in the editing process.
My passion with YouTube fell heavily upon editing the videos. I enjoyed filming the videos for sure, but where I really felt creative and where I really felt inspired was in the editing. And I got really into editing and I started editing videos more and more complicated. I started to make the edits of these videos more and more complicated. It got to a point where I couldn't do it anymore because I started to do other things as well. I started a podcast, I was working on other projects, and I also wanted to have a social life, and I felt like I couldn't do it all at once. So I quit editing and I handed that off to a very talented editor. And for the past 2 years, that structure has been incredible.
And at times we need to outsource our work. Our lives and day jobs just might require that of us. I don't mean to talk down to you. I promise I don't. I promise I'm not. There's a reason I'm saying this. But as an example, I remember my dad advising my brother Bob, Hearts for Bob, to make a flyer when he was a teenager advertising lawn mowing services. And sort of the angle that my dad kind of helped my brother with from like a marketing perspective was saying like, how much is your time worth, and like calculate it by, taking your yearly income and divide it by this many hours and blah, blah, blah. And, how much time does it take to mow your lawn? Is it worth your time? Essentially, like, if your work garners you $50 an hour, why not pay this teenage kid $20 for an hour's worth of work? It was kind of the idea, which is funny because somebody like my dad was someone who, at that time anyway, described yard work as his zen. It was like his time to really just kind of like focus on him, his thoughts. It calmed him down. So a touch of irony, but I do think that kind of ties into what's going on here. So Emma talks about how hiring this editor really kind of freed up her time. She had a lot more time on her hands. And there were times when she said that she would go to relax.
Over the past 6 months, I've developed this extreme level of self-hatred. And that showed itself in really obvious ways. For example, anytime I would lay in bed, try to relax, I would feel guilt the whole time. I'd be angry at myself the whole time for laying in bed. Which is also backwards because, I know that laying in bed is necessary, and I know that sometimes you need to lay in bed for a few days. And I'll give advice on this podcast saying, if you need to lay in bed, lay in bed. Don't beat yourself up over it. Yet, I would not let myself rest. Like, if I was resting, I would feel guilty. And I think a big part of that was because I was like, Emma, your job is so fucking easy. You film a video and you send it off to an editor. You don't even have to do anything. Why are you in bed all day? You don't deserve to lay in bed. You don't work hard enough.
And she even kind of goes on to describe how this was sort of a pattern throughout her life, that it wasn't just in those moments.
My self-hatred was showing itself in other ways, though, too. Like when I would have social interactions with people, I constantly felt like I was being cringy or embarrassing. And I was constantly reflecting on different social interactions that I'd have, and I would nitpick them and just mentally destroy myself, saying mean things to myself about how I behave in social situations. And nobody really knew about it. And to be honest, I wasn't even fully aware of it. Like, it was happening in the background. It was like white noise in my head. And I would have moments where I was aware of it. And I was like, this needs to stop. Like, why am I so fucking mean to myself? But I kind of never really let it come to the forefront of my brain because I was constantly distracting myself with talking to people on the phone and, even reading books or like watching documentaries or watching YouTube or hanging out with people.
She describes it as kind of a self-hatred at times, but just this sense of being overly self-critical is how I would rather frame it, because I think that that's something that a lot more of us can connect to. But she talks about this kind of snowballing to the point where she wasn't even able to create anymore. Just kind of, she would seize up whenever it did get to the point where she wanted to film something for her YouTube channel because she had those same reservations and insecurities that she's not funny enough, she's too outgoing, she's not outgoing enough, etc.
But here was when shit hit the fan. You see, like, it got to a point where this self-loathing was so bad that I couldn't create things. Like, I had so much self-hatred and self-doubt. I feel like everything I said was cringy. I feel like everything I said was embarrassing. I feel like everything that I'm doing is cringy and embarrassing. I feel like everything that I'm saying, everything about me, I feel is just dumb and stupid. So I decided I would take a break on YouTube.
And this is where we get to the point where she talks about taking a break, which is really what this whole podcast episode was predicated on. It was meant to kind of explain this break she took on her YouTube channel. But she also talks about the fear of taking a break on YouTube, which is a very real thing for creators on this platform.
Now, taking a break on YouTube is terrifying because the way that YouTube works is that it's like a marathon. You need to be consistent or else you will be forgotten. You know what I'm saying? You can't overdo it right? You can't do too much. You can't upload too many videos or else you're annoying. But you also can't neglect uploading, because if you do, then you'll be forgotten. It's the same thing as a marathon. If you run too fast, you'll burn yourself out. If you run too slow, you'll finish last. You have to find the happy medium, you know? But that's why taking a break on YouTube is scary, because it feels like if you take a break, you'll be forgotten.
I want to do this thing where I'm like, any marathoner would tell you not to sprint at the beginning of a marathon or else you'll burn yourself out, which in theory I think is the case, but I've also never run a marathon. So this is all theoretical. Surely some of you have run marathons, so maybe you can help my audience know if this is the case, which I'm pretty sure it is. I did take a running class in college. It was not fun. So she was afraid to take this break, but went into what happened when she did allow herself to take that break.
The reason why I wasn't getting as much done as I wanted to, and the reason why I was laying in bed so much, was because every time I was in bed, every time I was relaxing and trying to recharge, I was using that time to beat myself up and scream at myself internally for not doing enough. So instead of my bedtime and my relaxation time being relaxation time, I was just making myself more tired because I was not letting myself truly recharge. And that was the first thing I realized upon spending a week in bed. And that was huge for me. You recharge way quicker than you can even imagine. Fully, 100%, without any guilt or any shame. You recharge way quicker than you can even imagine. And you start getting excited about doing things again.
She felt like she was lacking passion in her life. She describes a few things that she had, like some little hobbies that she has.
And I realized that the reason why I hate myself is because I don't have a passion. And I had been trying to find a passion over the past few months. I started getting into reading. I started playing drums. I bought a sewing machine. And I tried to, do all of those things and become passionate about it. And the truth is, I enjoy doing all of those things. I enjoy playing drums. I love it. I enjoy reading books. I love it. I love those things. But I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily super passionate about them, because I would say that a passion is something that makes you want to get up in the morning, like gets you up in the morning, gives you a feeling of purpose.
She talks about having these hobbies and how they're fun, they're time fillers, but they're not a reason to get up and get out of bed every day. She talks about them not being like passions in her life and thus not really giving her purpose in life. She talks about everybody having like a ball of energy inside. This was something I really resonated with, that we all have a ball of energy inside.
And then I had this kind of epiphany, and it kind of came to me almost like in images in my mind. So I'll try to paint the picture to you that my brain painted to me. Let's say you don't have a passion for something. You don't have anything to put your energy towards. Your energy just stays pent up inside. And sometimes that might be okay, and sometimes that might be a great thing. But if your energy stays inside of you for too long and it doesn't have anything to attach to, it doesn't have anything to dissect, to obsess over, to be excited about, your energy inside of you starts to attack yourself. And you start fixating on yourself. And I think for a certain amount of time, that can be a good thing, because that can cause you to self-reflect and to grow, which is great. But after you self-reflect and grow, your energy is still inside of you and it's still rumbling around. And because you've already done the self-reflection that you need to do, now your energy inside you has nothing to do, right? So it starts attacking inward, and it starts seeping into the crevices that it shouldn't be seeping into. And what started happening was it started attacking me, and I started to overanalyze myself, and I started to nitpick at myself because I didn't have anything better to do. My energy was attacking myself. But it happened kind of slowly and over time. So I didn't really realize that it was happening.
And she got a little nuanced here. And we know how much I love some nuanced thinking. So Emma doesn't go straight into, this energy attacking the self being a bad thing, because I think about this a lot. Instead of depression being the really common theme when I talk about mental health, oftentimes it's anxiety. So this idea that there's all this energy inside, and if we just kind of sit with it, it's going to attack the self. I've said some very similar things in different words before. So this very much resonated with me. But the first thing she said was that this is not necessarily a bad thing when that energy attacks the self, because when it initially attacks the self, then it can force the person into change and growth. But it can be bad if it stays too long and that growth doesn't happen. And then that energy, she says, kind of starts to seep into the cracks of the person. And so that's kind of what she attributed to when she talks about those moments where she was really nitpicking at herself, laying in bed, beating herself up. She was expending all of her energy, really kind of just like attacking herself, which kind of brought her full circle to this idea that she really needed to find her passion in life. And I want to take a moment because I do want to say that for everything that I'm going to say and everything that I've said so far and everything Emma said, I do think that these, while mental health struggles, like I said, are non-discriminatory, everyone everywhere can go through whatever mental health struggles. But I do think that this concept of like taking time, choosing your activities, all that, I do think there's a certain amount of privilege that one must have to really lean into like these ideas and these practices. Though I would venture to say that most of us, certainly anybody who has time to watch one of my long ass videos on YouTube, we have at least some amount of time. I think if you have even enough time to like mindlessly scroll social media, you can implement some of this stuff into your life. But as far as like taking a week off just to lie in bed and think about these things, not everybody has the luxury or the privilege of being able to do that. So I want to recognize like that is the case. Hell, I don't even have the ability to really like take a week off and just lay in bed and think. But I still think that there are principles tied in here that I can apply to my life. And so let's continue.
Where could my passion lie? And does it already exist, but I'm just not leaning into it as much as I should? And I really thought about it, and I was like, I think my passion is editing YouTube videos. I think that that's what my passion is. And I think that that's why I felt like shit about myself, is because that part of my life has been removed.
She discovered that passion was in editing, which was the passion she discovered when she was 16. So she talks about taking on the editing process again and how, a whole day would go by and she wouldn't even realize that the time passed. Like, Emma Chamberlain, can you edit my videos? Because editing can be fun, but I don't know that I enjoy it as much as Emma Chamberlain does. And that might be an issue of time, to be quite honest. Like, that might be one of those things that if I had the time, I would enjoy it that much.
I spent a whole day in bed editing this video. And in my head, I was like, this is never going to reach the internet. I'm just kind of testing the waters to see how I feel about editing and to see if this is kind of the missing piece. And so I spent 12 hours in bed editing. I edited from approximately 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I only got out of bed to eat and take a shit. Like, that was it. And I remember looking at the clock and it was 7:30. And the whole day flew by and I didn't even notice that 12 hours had went by. I didn't go on my phone all day. I wasn't hyper fixated on myself. I wasn't thinking about myself. I wasn't angry at myself. And for the first time in probably a year, I felt accomplished. And I was proud of how it turned out. And it made me feel good about myself. And that's when I realized, okay, this has been the problem all along.
And while this is a love-hate thing for me, she talks about creative passions being challenging, and I can agree with that. Being creative is challenging. It requires resources, mental resources, and oftentimes physical resources as well. It's no surprise at this point, but all of this kind of led her to realize that she needed to be editing on a regular basis in order to feel happy on a regular basis. That the solution to her problem was to take on the role as an editor. Whereas in the past, she had a problem, and the solution to that problem was to pass off that role as an editor. So I really like that she pointed this out, because I do think oftentimes we can think too much in absolutes. Like if something is bad for me and I need to give it away and have somebody else do it, that I might not need that in my life again later. Or the idea that because we love doing something that we need to be doing that all the time. It didn't make sense for Emma at a time, and so she did have to pass it off. But these things kind of change with the tides. Our time frees up and then it gets sucked up. Again, this is a problem with the privileged. God bless the single mothers out there that are working multiple jobs in order to make ends meet so that their kids can be healthy and clothed. Again, people like that don't necessarily have the luxury of kind of organizing their time and taking on certain roles and putting others away. So in no way is this meant to say this is so easy, you can do it too. I just think that it's good food for thought for anybody who does have time and is having problems with motivation and finding they're happy. And so here is where I kind of touched on this earlier, but she talks about how she was spending more time alone, more time in editing, and realizing that her editing style was moving in a different direction from what it used to be. Like I said, upbeat, quirky, funny, fast-paced. Now it has this kind of more mature feel. I called it moodier. It's kind of a vibe, as the kids would say. It's embarrassing for me to use terms like that, but then there are times where I'm like, well, what's a better way of describing this? Emma Chamberlain is vibe goals. I don't know what I'm saying. But she was afraid that people weren't going to like this new style that her videos were taking on.
I know that the difference between the editing is not that big of a deal to somebody who's maybe watching it. It's a lot less noticeable, but for me it was scary because I've been editing in this same kind of style for pretty much my whole YouTube life. It's evolved a little bit, but it's been very similar. Very fast-paced, very upbeat. And this latest video was not that way because that's just not the way that I want to edit anymore. And I was nervous that people were going to be like, well, this is not what we signed up for, so we're out. But that didn't happen.
She was happily surprised that her audience stuck with it. And I think that this is so important to pay attention to. Oftentimes we complain about creators, or just not even complain, but will commentate on what's going on with the creators platform, particularly when they start young and or have a young audience, and then they create content that doesn't evolve over time. Then those audience members start to grow up and then no longer have an appetite for that kind of more immature content that they were consuming when they were younger. And given that Emma Chamberlain was 16 when she started this career, it makes sense that her audience was probably somewhere around that same age group, maybe a little younger, maybe even a little bit older. But at this point, you know, this group of, let's say, mostly like teenagers and tweens maybe are now in their late teens and 20s and probably interested in more of a vibe and a mood. Again, words, how do I find them? But the more mature content just makes sense, given that she is more mature. She's grown up. She's gone through these life experiences. And like I said earlier, there was a conversation in there about, you know, well, are content creators kind of emotionally stunted at where they started creating or became famous or, you know, were in the public eye or whatever you want to say? Or is it the opposite? I think of certain creators like James Charles, the D'Amelios, and just kind of how any criticism of James Charles is totally deserved, in my opinion. But he did learn how to be a really savvy businessman really early on. And now we're seeing the D'Amelio sisters kind of breaking down, crying, and having these very serious mental health moments and struggles as a result of how the public is treating them at such a young age. I'm 35 and it's difficult for me at times. I can't imagine being 16, 17, 19 and trying to navigate that. But not only that, but like going from being just a regular teenager to being a multi-millionaire and really like having a career. I didn't even go through my 20s with me and my friends talking about having careers. We had jobs in our 20s, but these people have careers at a really young age. They're making a lot of money. They're running their own businesses and brands at 16, 17 years old. So in a sense, I could tell, just like the way Emma would, in some videos, just like drive around her old neighborhoods, talk about memories that she had when she had this apartment in this place. And it's like, at that age, I was doing the quote unquote normal thing, you know, going off to college. But, you know, there's kind of a handbook for that sort of thing. You know, life in general doesn't have a handbook, but, you know, the trajectory of turning 17, 18 years old, going off to college, most of your friends doing the same, perhaps getting to go to school with your friends. Like you kind of go through this process together, and many people in many generations before you have done the same thing. And so there's kind of a natural progression to it all. But this, becoming famous, becoming an influencer from your bedroom at the age of 16, and then moving into your own apartment and running your own business, and then, you know, going on trips to Paris and then flying to New York for the Met Gala, just like, whoa, right? So in a sense, I really appreciate that Emma and other creators like her are honest when they show their lives, new, grown up, perhaps more glamorous, but can still relate to everyday struggles, or meaning, you know, struggles that everyday people also go through. Because how many of us out there go through periods where we beat ourselves up for one reason or another, or all the reasons? And it's also something that transcends age groups. I do think that in general, the older you get, the more you come to be a little more at peace with yourself. So some of the things that Emma describes, I think, is just very on time with her being in her 20s. Actually, I feel like a lot of the things that she's talking about are like struggles that I went through across my 20s. And perhaps she's coming out on the other side where most 30-year-olds would be at 20 years old. Who knows? I'm going to be watching more Emma Chamberlain content, so we'll see what my assessment is of her from a very not professional perspective, but just in terms of how mature and wise I find her to be, which so far I'm impressed, because she kind of boils down all of these anecdotes to a really palatable message, kind of a moral of the story for her audience.
And when you're in the midst of being at rock bottom, it can feel like nothing good could ever come of it. And you might even be angry at yourself for getting there. But throughout my life, every time I've ever hit rock bottom, it's always been right before a breakthrough. Sometimes you have to get to a point that is as bad as it can get before you can get motivated and even realize that a change needs to happen. So next time you're at rock bottom, be patient with yourself and let yourself lay in bed for a week straight and watch stupid TV. And don't be mad at yourself for just this once for laying in bed. And you will realize shit. Okay? You will realize shit. And it will all come together. And it might not be in a way that you expect, because let me tell you, I did not expect that I was going to decide that I wanted to start editing again. It was the last thing I thought I was going to come up with. But yet here we are. I think rock bottom is actually a really beautiful place. I think a lot of people hit rock bottom and then find their passion. You hear a lot of stories like that. People, who maybe had some sort of addiction or, were really depressed or really anxious, and they hit rock bottom with it. And the only way that they were able to get out of it was by throwing themselves into something. But if you're constantly hating yourself because you don't have it figured out and you don't know what to do to make your life better and you don't know how you're going to turn it around and you don't know how to get the motivation to get out of bed and you're pissed at yourself, you just make the problem worse. I'm more productive than I've ever been. I've been working on things every day, all day long.
She tells her audience that the next time you reach a rock bottom, be patient with yourself. And so she ends up describing rock bottom as beautiful. She says that she is more productive than ever right now, but if she ever feels like she needs to take a break,
if I need a break, I'm going to take it and I'm not going to fucking feel bad about it. Because guess what? If I just lean into it and let myself relax 100%, that's not pointless. That's not a waste of time.
Which I think is just so, I've already used words like wise and mature a lot in this video. So I'm trying to think of let's pull out the thesaurus. It's just an impressive amount of introspection and self-awareness at such a young age. I'm always impressed when people are able to do these things while their brains are still literally developing. And I think that learning kind of how hard to be on yourself in what moments and when to go easier on yourself is really a skill that for me has taken me over 30 years to kind of hone. And it's something that I don't think anybody's perfect at. So I'm working on it. I'm getting better at it. And it always changes too, depending on your life circumstances. So for me, a YouTube career, having a platform was something that the fact that I'm here less than 2 years after I started, there are a lot of things that I've had to learn in a short period of time. And I've had for sure, really big life rock bottoms, meaning rock bottoms where you end up in a psych ward, getting detoxed off of substances and then going to meetings, and then you're living this life where you don't ever drink or have hangovers. When that happens, some people will resonate with that. And it's different for everyone. We all have different rock bottoms. And it also depends too on, my earring just flipped out. It also depends on what your mental health struggles look like. Like I said, for me, oftentimes it's anxiety. That's a really big one for me. I deal with depression at times too, but it's not the big one for me. So they're different. These struggles are different for everyone. But I think some of the lessons that we learn after going to therapy, after working on ourselves, introspecting, finding what works, a lot of the same advice applies across different struggles. And for me, I felt that I was reaching kind of a rock bottom with my content on YouTube. It wasn't a huge deal. It wasn't, it wasn't a moment in time where I'm going to look back and get all kinds of emotional over this time. But I realized that I needed to make a change in my content. And hopefully with this video and those to come, we do see some changes in the kind of content. Hopefully it's something you like. Hopefully it's something I like. But the point is that I was doing the same thing. Again, sometimes things work for you at one point and then they don't at another. And maybe one day you need to go back to the way things were because that suits you again. But for me, I reached a point with my content where I'm like, okay, I'm talking about the same things. My purpose is not really there anymore because the people and the things I'm talking about are people and things that don't want to change. Not that to be clear, when I make videos, I don't make them for the creators I'm talking about. I make them for the people who want to consume the content that can relate to it in some way. But if you're continuing to talk about people who in situations that are just never going to change or are just so reluctant to change, and they need to work on their own timeline that is just so much longer than we could have hoped for them, then it's time that we as an audience move on from that topic and just let that happen on its own time. We did our part. We did our part by talking about these things, and you just kind of start to go crazy when you keep frustrating yourself over the same things that are not changing. So it's important to be able to recognize when you are at a bottom, a rock bottom. And I will say, just kind of with my experience before I got sober, I'm a pretty hard-headed person when it comes to recognizing that I'm at a bottom. Definitely better at it now. I hope to think that I'm pretty good at it now, at least compared to how I used to be. But, I remember there was a specific day or two, I remember a little while ago, where I was just waking up and I was frustrated with the way things were, particularly to do with my YouTube platform. I didn't like the numbers I was seeing. I didn't like the feedback I was getting, just the overall. And to be fair, some of the energy that I invited into my life and onto my platform, I don't regret. It's bad energy, and I think I invited it for good reasons. And so that's not to say that every time something bad happens is because you've done something wrong, but I realize that if this stuff is not changing, I can tell myself like, oh, this is just the way things go sometimes. And that kind of carried me for a little while. This is just the way things go. Things will turn up. Things will pick up again. And perhaps that would have been true, but I realized at one point that maybe the way I'm doing things just isn't working right now. Maybe it's stopped serving me and it's time to change. So it was that day that I decided, okay, I'm going to let my audience know that I'm kind of in a transitional period. I want to start making content that is different. I hear the feedback, whether positive or negative, nice, mean, I'm listening to it. It means something to me. And some things have to change, and that's fine because we all have to go through that from time to time. And this is not the first time this has happened, and it's certainly not the last time it's going to happen for me. And for me personally, going through that time where I'm like, okay, it's essentially like when I'm telling myself it's going to be okay. This is just the way things go. These people are just haters, or people will change their minds. Again, that might work for short periods of time. It might be true for a certain period of time, but waking up and having to tell myself that every day is a fight. It's a fight in and of itself. And it's a struggle. It's a struggle and it's a fight to continue being exactly how you've been and trying to make that fit, trying to make that work. But if you take a moment to go, okay, what if what I'm doing is not working? What if there's room for things to change and I don't necessarily need to fight by telling myself these things every day in the face of this just like negative energy, this like bad juju that I'm waking up to every day. Maybe just accept that the way that you're doing things is just not working anymore. And that's okay, because we have to fine tune these things from time to time. And so realizing that for me, and this is, I'm sure, different for everybody, but perhaps there's somebody who can kind of resonate with this. For me, it's kind of this practice of relinquishing control. And for me, when I have that control and things are not going how I want them to, and like I said, I feel that bad juju, but I'm trying to keep my spirits up, that's a very anxious place to be. And when I decide to relinquish that control by saying, I need to change something, I need to listen to other people or the world or something outside of me, I need help perhaps, but I definitely need change. That is that's letting go of your own way. And for me, typically that sense of relinquishing control, it comes with like a wash of relief, but at the same time, kind of some sadness in there. So, there were a couple of days there where I was feeling just kind of sad and embarrassed. I made a video before, I'm lost, I'm crying, I'm embarrassed or something like that. And I felt like that again. I was embarrassed because these things that I do, these changes that I have to go through, these moods that I go through, I'm now in the public eye with these things. And so, I felt kind of low there for a little bit. And after talking to some people that I trust, kind of coming up with some new ideas, or at the very least, just getting to the point where I'm open to new ideas, there was a sense of hope in that. And there's another sense of relief that's not so sad when you have that. It's a little bit more rejuvenating, that sense of hope. Also, allowing people to know that that's where I am, and having people recognize that I'm telling them that's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to go and tell 50,000 people that they know they need to change. And that's fine. I tend to be somebody who is just very straightforward with people. I want people to know, quite frankly, because if they're disenfranchised with me or my content, I want to let them know in case they're on their way out to maybe give me a chance if you have it in you. And for some people who liked the way that I continued to do things, perhaps they need a little warning that things are going to change. But I want to let people know when I've reached this point where I know I need to change something. And typically, not always, typically that is met with understanding. If it is a result of you listening to people, there can be some appreciation. And also, part of these changes too had to also come with me recognizing what parts of my life am I engaging in that is not serving me or others. And so that's why I said, even if you have time to mindlessly scroll social media, you might be able to benefit from implementing changes if you recognize that you're at a point where things are not working. I'm waking up to a feeling of bad juju every day. Like if that's the case, then it might just be a time to reassess your habits and where you're putting your energy. And that's not a bad thing. I agree with Emma that it's kind of a beautiful place when you realize it, especially when you realize it, because typically really like awesome things follow these sorts of periods. So I'm hopeful that awesome things will come as a result to me deciding to make some changes. It's a little scary because you have to break out of your way and find new ways. And who knows if those ways will work. But certainly what I was doing before wasn't working. So it can be scary, but what do you have to lose? So I really appreciated this message from Emma Chamberlain. Oh, and for what it's worth, I made this whole put a pin in this. We're going to talk about my dad mowing the lawn. To me, my dad mowing the lawn kind of seemed like a good parallel to Emma editing. Perhaps Emma's time is worth more than what it would cost to pay an editor to do that thing for her. But if that is her zen, if that is her passion, if that is her thing, then perhaps it is worth your time to do it. Just like for my dad, he recognized that for other people, it wasn't worth their time to mow the lawn. But for my dad, it was worth everything. Different strokes for different folks, different strokes at different times in your life. You just have to kind of be open to whatever that means. It's a practice in being really intuitive with oneself, by being very honest with yourself about how you're feeling every day when you wake up, how you're feeling every day when you go to sleep, everything in between. Am I feeling at peace? Am I feeling accomplished? Or am I feeling bothered? Am I feeling like I'm fighting fights that I don't want to fight every day? Like, I didn't mean to get all kinds of philosophical, but I blame Emma Chamberlain. But yeah, I just think it's super important to assess that on a regular basis, and to not get complacent and thinking that you figured it out for good. You may have figured it out for the time being, but there will come a day that you hit another bottom, and that's okay. Because as Emma Chamberlain told us, rock bottom can be a beautiful place, and it oftentimes precedes a breakthrough. So I'm really excited about going through this breakthrough and in front of all of you lovely people. It's scary at times, but I am looking forward to some positive changes. Without rambling on at the end of this, I want to just say thank you to Scentbird again for sponsoring this video. Thank you for giving my subscribers 30% off. Please follow the link in the description and use my code to get Scentbird for $11 for your first month. I highly recommend it. Like I said, I was considering it. I didn't know if it was something that I wanted to do. And then when I got this opportunity, I was like, holy shit. Yes, I wanted to do this. So I think it's a lot of fun, and I really like smelling good all the time. Check that out, please. It helps me. Obviously, you know that. All the usual things. Please like this video if you've enjoyed this conversation, or you're also looking forward to the change that's to come, or you yourself are going through this. Please let me know. Like, what are you going through right now? Or what point are you at? When was your last rock bottom? This is not me just like pushing for engagement, because I've already asked you guys a few things. But at this point, I genuinely am curious, because I don't want to feel alone. I want to know that there are other people that like I said, that this message resonates with, just like Emma's message resonated with me. I really hope that what I'm saying means something to someone. So find a way to let me know, whether that's leaving a comment or shooting me an email, finding me on social media and sending me a message there. I'm helloleesh everywhere. You can join my Patreon, patreon.com/helloleesh, where you get to know me a little bit better. You get to know the people in this community a little bit better, who are an amazing, diverse group of people who are also like-minded in ways that I think are important. And lastly, please join me on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Basically a Podcast, which is just a live event where I have conversations with you guys, my audience. Mondays on social media, as well as my community tab on YouTube, I share the upcoming topic with you so that you can write in and give me your thoughts, whether that be in the comments of Instagram or Twitter or community tab. Make sure you're subscribed so that you can see my community tab posts, or via email, that's bap@helloleesh.com. So I would really love it if you would join me there for the conversations that we're having there. And to you, the one person who's watching, who's not me, I love you, dude. Thank you for watching to this point. Thank you for switching gears with me. Please let me know what you think. I really want to know how I'm doing. I know this is early on in any sort of change, but I'm eager to hear your thoughts. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to talk to you guys. BAP is probably the next time I'll talk to you guys. Otherwise, I'll see you on social media or on Discord if you're one of my patrons. All right. Talk to you later. Love you. Bye.